When the fluctuations of life rush past like endless waves, there is a strange moment that everyone has touched. A moment when words suddenly become superfluous, not because the topic has run dry, not because of a fear of facing things, but because in a very brief minute, the mind sees more clearly than ever before. And right at that moment, all sounds seem to sink down, leaving only silence seeping into every vein of perception. The ancients used to say that when understanding is not yet deep, people often speak to assert themselves. When they understand a little more, they speak to share. But when they see clearly, words fall away naturally like a leaf leaving a branch, not caused by the wind, but because the proper season has arrived. In youth, everyone once believed that words could turn everything around. The more they believed, the more they spoke, and the more they spoke, the more they created a hard shell around an anxiety that was never looked at directly. Then one day, after too many misguided debates, after times when well-intentioned words turned into arrows that unintentionally hurt others, we begin to realize a paradox. There are things that only silence can understand. And from that point, the journey leading to the quietude of the awakened person begins. When they do not yet see, people speak to be heard. When they first begin to see, they speak to share. But when they see clearly, they fall silent because every argument is born from a mind that wants to win or lose, and every reason bears the mark of the ego wanting to prove itself. When that ego gradually dissolves, words also become lighter, falling from life like fragments of sound that were once important but have now turned to dust. Some ask why the more mature one gets, the less one speaks. But quietness is not a withdrawal from the world. It is the melting away of a layer of needs that once clung very tightly. The need to be understood, to be recognized, to stand on the right side. When those needs are gone, people remain silent not because they despise life, but because they have heard something more important. Hearing themselves, all noises still echo, but they no longer crash into the mind. From infancy, humans used sound to assert existence. But the older we get, the more complicated the way we use sound becomes. We tell of beliefs, of wounds, of the fear of being forgotten amidst a world with too much noise. We speak to be understood, speak to hide the smoldering emptiness inside. And then words become a suit of armor protecting an anxiety that we have never dared to face. Every time we speak, we feel like we are pinning a marker into the world to confirm that we are still there. But the irony is the more we speak, the more we lose the ability to listen. When the mind is not yet still, words always carry the energy of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being forgotten, fear of no longer having value. There are people who speak ceaselessly, as if a silence long enough would force them to hear the echo they once avoided. The sound of loneliness, of doubt, of the meaninglessness of their own lives. They speak to fill, to cover, to reassure themselves that they are still existing. The world, therefore, becomes noisier and noisier. Yet people understand each other less and less. Some speak to teach, some speak to prove, some speak just to hear their own voice like a hollow drum echoing in a cave. All stem from an ego demanding to be acknowledged. But the more we try to prove we are right, the further we drift from the truth. Truth does not lie on either side of the argument but in the space between, where both sides are silent. There are those who have practiced for a long time, read many scriptures, are full of words but empty of insight. They speak of compassion, yet their eyes still sparkle with judgment. They speak of selflessness, but every word bears the mark of an ego wanting to be praised as enlightened when words are used as proof. They no longer serve as a bridge, but become an invisible wall separating person from person, and deeper still, separating themselves from the truth. Then at some point, like a very slight movement in the mind, we understand that no one truly needs to be persuaded. Everyone is living in a world they believe to be right. And if they themselves do not want to wake up, no words can move them. Understanding this, people no longer want to force anyone to listen to them. Silence gradually replaces interpretation, not because of a lack of ideas, but because the limits of words have been clearly seen. Language, no matter how skillfully arranged, is just a shadow of the real. It is like a map, useful, but never the land itself. We can speak of love, but that word does not contain the warmth of an embrace. We can speak of suffering, but that sound cannot carry the constriction of the heart when losing the most precious thing. We can speak of liberation, but speaking forever will not touch liberation if the mind has not yet seen. The Buddha once remained silent before many questions, not because he did not know the answer, but because the questioner could not yet understand the answer. Every word, once uttered, belongs to the past. Only silence allows us to touch what is living, what is operating right in this moment. When understanding that, the awakened person steps back. They no longer rush to explain, no longer want to name the unnameable. The more you call it, the further away it gets. Truth is like the wind. It is only present when we stop grasping. One who speaks little hears much. One who hears much sees deeply. And one who sees deeply needs to speak no more. From here, stillness is no longer the absence of sound but becomes the language of a different level of understanding. A language without words, without sound, directed at no one, but anyone quiet enough will hear it themselves. From the moment stillness gently touches the bottom of the mind, one begins to realize a very strange thing. The more words there are, the thinner the truth becomes. Every time we interpret, we are like covering a naturally bright mirror with a layer of mist. Every word uttered is a trace of something that has died in the moment. Only when we no longer try to speak can we see the living taking place right before our eyes. Some ask how to communicate without speaking, but what humans usually call communication is actually just a way of pushing one's beliefs onto others. Words do not touch anyone's heart. They only knock on the shell that each person wears. Only when there is deep listening does a small sentence become a boat taking a person across the river of delusion. But when the mind is not present, even scriptures, Dharma words, or words of wisdom, are just echoes falling into a desert. When clearly seeing that limit, the awakened person stops being anxious to explain. They no longer want to define the indefinable, no longer want to hold tight to what must be left to flow naturally. Like water, the more it is grasped, the more it slips from the hand. Truth only appears when we stop grasping. Also from here, silence becomes a natural state, not the type of silence caused by force or suppression, but a silence arising from the thorough realization that words can muddy a naturally still lake. A well-intentioned sentence can also create unnecessary ripples. An explanation can also drive others further from themselves. When seeing that, humans no longer want to squeeze more noise into life. That silence is not emptiness. It has depth like the bottom of the ocean, where every movement slows down and becomes clear in the stillness. All phenomena display themselves exactly as they are, no more, no less. The bad is no longer hateful. The good is no longer something to cling to. All become waves that come and go. Nothing needs evaluating. Therefore, when someone gets angry, the awakened person does not react not because they are unfeeling, but because they clearly see that anger is just a cloud that will soon dissolve. If we respond, we lose ourselves in that fleeting wave. But if we remain silent, the wave breaks upon itself. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything without distortion, without interference. Some ask, if everyone were silent, what would become of the world? But the world has never been at peace because humans speak too much. How much suffering, how many wars, how much damage all started with words. A promise, a slander, a judgment, a lie. Silent people do not make the world mute. They just do not contribute more noise. In that silence, people hear what has been neglected for so long, the true rhythm of life. When the mind is still, the way of seeing is different, the way of hearing is different, and the way of touching the world is also different. Every step, every breath is like an act of listening, not listening to the sounds outside, but listening to the stream of life operating inside, no longer wanting to interject, because everything that needs to be said has already been said, not by humans but by the wind, by the leaves, by the rain, by existence itself. Stillness does not lose one's identity. It brightens the deepest part of a human being. That depth is not conditioned by praise or blame, success or failure, gain or loss. When the mind is quiet enough, the world is naturally very peaceful, not peaceful on the outside, but peaceful within the observer. And right from that peace, a crucial transformation appears. Humans begin to see that they no longer want to control, because only a fearful mind controls everything. When we no longer fear loss, no longer fear being wrong, no longer fear being judged, we let go. And when we let go, the seeing becomes transparent. Then one day, we understand that praise or blame are just sounds passing through an open ear. There is no I to be praised, nor an I to be hurt. Those sounds come and go like wind blowing through a door. Only the silent presence remains. From this point, the outside world suddenly becomes smaller. When the heart is narrow, small things become big. When the heart is wide, a storm is just a cloud passing by. Serenity becomes a way of seeing, not an emotional state. It does not come from changing circumstances but from no longer being controlled by circumstances. A paradox appears. When one no longer wants to win, there is no one left to lose. When one no longer wants to be right, no one is wrong. The polarities of gain and loss, superiority and inferiority, success and failure dissolve like a game of the unquiet ego. And when that game ends, only a space full of light remains. Also from that light, one clearly sees that the world does not need us to argue to exist. It only needs to be seen by a mind that is no longer distorted by the need to prove itself. When the mind becomes like a flat lake, every reflection is clear without needing any explanation. The awakened person, therefore, becomes quiet, not because they do not know how to speak, but because they have understood what should be said and what should be left in silence. And understanding this, they have walked halfway on the journey of liberation from suffering. When silence begins to take root in the inner life, another understanding gradually reveals itself. Silence is not the disappearance of the voice, but the disappearance of the speaker. It is precisely that disappearance that makes everything clearer, purer. Outsiders looking in think it is a withdrawal, but in reality, it is a form of awakening. The deeper one goes into stillness, the more one realizes that reaction is a product of instinct, while silence is a product of seeing. Someone gets angry, but the awakened person does not respond, not because they are callous, but because they clearly see the anger as a cloud sliding across the sky. That cloud comes and goes, not real, not durable. If we rush to reply, we lose ourselves in that moment. But if we remain silent, the cloud dissolves and the sky becomes clear again in silence. Therefore, it is not indifference, but the highest form of observation. In that observation, every object returns to its proper place. The bad no longer has the strength to disturb. The good no longer causes us to cling. There is no longer division, no longer assigning names, no longer a need to intervene. Mind at peace, everything at peace. When people ask, if everyone is silent, what will this world be like? The answer is actually not difficult. because the world has never been peaceful because people speak too much. From the smallest conflicts to the longest wars in human history, all started with a word, a promise, an accusation, a judgment, a lie to protect the ego. Those sounds create countless shockwaves, pushing humans away from each other and pushing themselves away from the root of truth. The quiet person does not make the world mute. They only stop adding noise to it. And in that stopping, they begin to hear what has long been hidden, the true heartbeat of life. When the mind no longer wavers because of gain, loss, blame, right, every smallest sound becomes a form of expression of life. Humans no longer look with old eyes, no longer hear with old ears, and no longer live by old habits. In every second of stillness, they touch what noise previously obscured. The lake of the soul is naturally flat, but because for so many years the winds of greed and delusion caused it to ripple, we thought it was always moving. Only when there is no longer a reaction does that lake gradually return to its true nature. No one taught them how to be silent. Life itself taught them. Every time we rush to reply and find ourselves caught in a whirlwind, we learn a layer. Every time we say something unnecessary that causes unintended hurt, we learn another layer. Every time we realize that the words we uttered were just a reaction to fear, we learn yet another layer. We learn until we see that silence is the path that causes the least pain. When living in silence long enough, humans realize a paradoxical truth. Circumstances do not decide peace, but how we look at circumstances does. Out there, storms can rise at any time, but if the inside is already calm, we still see everything like a light rain falling on a lake. It does not make us panic, does not make us shrink, does not make us angry. It is simply an event that happens and then dissolves. From there, things that were once important suddenly become small. People once wanted to speak up to defend their rightness, once wanted to argue to prove they were not wrong, but the more clearly they see, the more they understand. What is right in one's own eyes is just a slice of infinite reality. Each person looks from an angle, each person stands at a different position of consciousness. No one is completely right. No one is completely wrong. There are only different views. The world, therefore, does not need us to argue to exist. It only needs us to understand so we no longer suffer from our own narrow vision. When understanding this, every reaction slows down. Someone speaks ill of us, we smile. Someone praises us, we also smile. Not because we are trying to suppress it, but because we have clearly seen that praise or blame are just sounds passing through. That sound cannot touch the deepest part of the mind. Another interesting thing also appears. The outside world is a reflection of the inside world. When the mind is narrow, small things become big. When the mind is wide, big things are as light as wind. And when the mind is at peace, humans no longer want to control. The mind that wants to control is a mind that is still fearful. When fear dissolves, the need to control also disappears. That empty space opens up a new region of light, where everything happens without being distorted by personal will. A person with a peaceful mind no longer uses words to impress, no longer uses words to teach others how to live, no longer uses words to lead. Their mere presence makes others feel at peace. They do not need to explain because the very way they live is the explanation. A slight smile is enough to be a Dharma teaching. A quiet breath is enough to be a scripture without words. In that peace, humans realize one thing: they no longer want to win. And when there is no longer a desire to win, there is no one left to lose to. The polarities that society constructs, gain and loss, superiority and inferiority, success and failure, suddenly become weightless. The mind is like a dry leaf dropped onto a stream, drifting away without knowing where. but needing not know because the stream itself carries the leaf in the right direction. This moment marks a silent but profound transformation. Humans no longer want to speak much, not because they have run out of things to say, but because they have clearly seen what truly needs to be said and what should be left in silence. And that silence becomes a door opening to a new depth of consciousness. There are times when stillness is no longer a choice, but becomes the inevitable result of a long journey through countless cracks and breaks. When humans have experienced enough to clearly see the limits of words, they step to a different level of understanding, where the ego gradually melts soft like salt touching water. It is that melting that makes words, once heavy with intent, become light and eventually no longer need to appear. The ego speaks continuously to assert that it exists. Every word is an effort to hold onto its shadow in the world. But one day, after too many disappointments, after the fatigue of repetitive debates, after collisions that make us clearly see that our rightness is as impermanent as a breath, we let go, not letting go passively, but letting go after thoroughly seeing the mechanism of suffering. And from that letting go, a different kind of stillness appears, no longer a speaker, only a natural flow. Words, if any, carry no intent, contain no ambition to persuade, aim for no influence. It is like breath, like wind, like water flowing through a rocky crevice and going according to conditions, leaving no trace. When people hear such a person speak, what touches them does not lie in the sound but lies in the silence between those sounds. That silence reflects the listener. The silence of a person with true sight is like a colorless mirror. Whoever looks and sees themselves, not an image distorted by outside intent. In life, we often see people who speak a lot to prove they understand. But there are those who do not need to speak. Just their presence is enough. Their calm eyes, their quiet breath, the way they listen without rushing to conclude, all those things become a form of expression of a wordless teaching. And the strange thing is that the wordless teaching is always the thing that touches deepest, because it does not stumble against the fences of reason. It goes straight to the deepest place that humans have long avoided. That place cannot be persuaded by logic. That place only opens when it meets a presence that is quiet enough, wide enough, tolerant enough. Some wonder why wise people often speak in metaphors, in images, and senses that do not explain directly. Because truth cannot be spoken straight. Speaking straight only causes it to be misunderstood. A mind not yet wide enough, even if hearing the truth in the clearest language, will only hear part. For a person who is ready, just a look, a vague sentence is enough to dissolve delusion. The awakened person, seeing this clearly, no longer rushes to want others to understand them. They know that every seed only sprouts when the soil is ready. No forcing, no urging, no coercion. A sentence falling into an unopened mind only creates resistance. But falling into a ripe mind, it becomes a path. The language of a person whose ego has dissolved has a strange touching power, not loud like a brass bell, not rushing, but soaking in gradually. Every word is as light as dust in the wind, but can make a person's heart vibrate like a string struck at the right point, not due to the power of sound, but due to the purity of the source emitting it. In today's world, the noise level has never been so great. Social media, news, debates, theories, all are like continuous waves crashing into the human mind, making them tired without realizing it. Amidst those shouts, silence becomes a form of courage, because to be silent in a world that constantly demands we speak, we must see through one thing. Nothing truly needs protecting. A person can scream to prove they are right only when inside them there is still fear to be erased. But when awakening grows, people no longer look for enemies to confront. They clearly see that the person scolding them, the person hating them, the person loving them all, are just small waves on the same sea surface. The sea surface does not change when waves crash. Only the waves dissolve into each other. Therefore, they choose silence not to avoid, but so as not to lose the whole view, not to be pulled this way or that by emotions, not to play an extra role in the countless dramas of life. In this silence, there is mature compassion that does not try to save anyone, only wants to understand, does not try to fix anyone, only wants to clearly see where they are on their own journey. Some ask, if everyone is silent, how will the world change? But the deepest changes of humanity have never started with shouts. They started with a seeing, an awakened person. Just standing still is enough to create change in those around, not by words, but by the energy of awareness. Like a candle that does not need to call anyone to look at it. It just needs to burn bright, and the darkness naturally dissolves. Truth, when it wants to be heard, never screams. It only whispers in the quietest moments of the inner self. When we are still noisy, we will miss it. When we still want to argue, we will not see. Truth does not come from the crowd, but comes in the minutes we sit alone, listening to the breath go in and out, and suddenly realizing all the answers have been there for a long time. Silence in its deepest layer is not the locking of the mouth, it is freedom from all forms. No need to become anyone, no need to take a side, no need to prove anything. There is only life breathing through us, gentle as wind passing through an open door. When there is no longer a speaker, no longer a listener, only a single stream of energy flowing. That stream bears no name, bears no intent, bears no shape. In that stream, all suffering melts like ice under the sun. All questions that urged us for years suddenly fall away, not because we found the answer, but because we realize there is no longer anyone asking. In that silence, humans see what they have been looking for all along. A place to return to. A place needing no effort, no straining, no fixing oneself, just breathing, and seeing clearly that everything they searched for on the spiritual path truly never lay outside of them. It is right here, right in the silence of the present. There are people who, when they appear, do not need to utter a word yet still make the person opposite want to listen, not because they studied much or read widely, nor because they have some power that compels respect. What makes them different lies in true presence, a presence that is not showy, not trying, not wanting to attract gazers, yet makes the space around them quieter, lighter, and clearer. When such a person looks at us, their gaze does not scrutinize, does not judge, does not look for flaws. It is like a flat lake reflecting the sky, adding nothing, removing nothing, and precisely because of that, the person being looked at suddenly feels seen completely. No hiding, no trying, no defending. That gaze is like opening a door for us to look back at ourselves. The things we avoided for years, in their peace, begin to surface. The noise within us begins to reveal itself. Fear, anger, worry, suffering, all gradually dissolve like thin mist under the sunlight. No advice needed, no analysis needed, no solution needed. Just meeting a person quiet enough, wide enough, true enough. The mind of the person opposite naturally rearranges its order. That is the power of silence, a kind of silence that is not cold, not avoidant, but a silence of wisdom forged in the fire of suffering and soothed by the water of understanding. In that deep silence, there is nothing to persuade, nothing to prove, nothing to win, nothing to fix, because that person understands that true transformation never happens from the outside. It happens when the mind is quiet enough to see itself. Like a lake does not need to try to reflect the sky, it just needs to be flat. The mind of the awakened person is the same. They do not try to preach, do not try to recruit followers, do not try to change anyone. They just live, and their very life simple, gentle, Creating no waves becomes a natural teaching. A slight smile can be a teaching. A quiet breath can be a teaching. An unhurried step can also be a teaching. Because when the ego dissolves, every action bears no mark of intent, no longer wanting to impress, no longer wanting to be praised, no longer wanting to be seen as awakened. It is precisely that lack of wanting that causes their vision to spread most powerfully. Someone once asked why enlightened beings often speak in metaphors. Because truth cannot be spoken straight. Whatever is spoken straight will be misunderstood. And an open mind, no matter how it hears, will only understand according to its current capacity. But for a mind with enough affinity, just a look, a gesture, a paradoxical sentence is enough to make it break open. The words of an awakened person are like a bell from very far away, not loud, but resonating for a very long time, not noisy. But every ripple silently spreads to the deepest regions of the mind. And what makes the listener vibrate is not the word, but the space the word leaves behind. That space is like a gap for light to flood into a world increasingly flooded with noise, where everyone wants to speak up, wants to prove, wants to defend, wants to debate. Silence becomes an act full of courage. Silent not because of cowardice, but silent because of understanding that every war ends when one side drops its weapons, and the final weapon that humans cling to is words. One who does not yet see speaks to hold onto themselves. One who is seeing speaks to clarify what is appearing. But one who has seen clearly has no need to speak anymore, because they know that truth does not belong to words. It belongs to the space between words, where the mind is not divided in two, where there are no longer winners and losers, where there are no longer right people and wrong people, only presence. Silence in its deepest sense is not muteness. It is freedom from all forms. No need to take a side, no need to assert a viewpoint, no need to become anything. When there is no longer a need to become, one returns to the original essence, an essence not broken, not lacking, not dependent. That essence simply is like light just shines, like wind just blows. In that world, the world of presence, there is no longer a speaker, no longer a listener, only life operating in a pure movement. When merging into that flow, all suffering disintegrates, not because we have solved it, but because we are no longer the person bearing it. There is no longer an ego embracing suffering. So suffering dissolves itself. When silence reaches its deepest degree, it becomes the voice of light, not physical light, but the light of understanding, of pure awareness. That light does not come from outside. It springs up from the very region of no desire in the mind. Just like when the final wind blows past, the dust settles, and the lake appears crystal clear. The truth was there from the start. Once the mind reaches this transparency, humans realize that nothing was ever lost, nothing ever needed finding, nothing needed achieving or keeping. It is just that for so long, the noise of oneself covered that up. At that time, silence is no longer an action, it becomes a natural nature. The awakened person does not try to be silent. They are silent because there is nothing left to say. Everything has been understood. There is no longer self and life, only existence wide and calm, like the sky bearing no trace of any cloud that once passed. There are times when silence no longer bears the shape of stopping. It becomes a natural stream of life, like breath, like light, like the beating of the heart that we no longer need to control. The person who reaches that stillness does not vanish from life, does not leave the world, nor withdraw into separation. They still are present amidst so many movements, still doing, still living, still loving. But everything they touch no longer leaves a trace of the ego. When the mind is clear enough, every action becomes as light as wine, no longer hoping to be understood, no longer needing to be praised, no longer worrying about being criticized, no longer trying to become an image. They walk through life like clear water, having no shape, but permeating everywhere it flows. And in that flow, others sense a strange thing, serenity. That person does not speak much, but their presence makes others feel at peace. No caressing, no pampering, no teaching words, but the way they listen, the way they look, the way they breathe are all silent lessons. Because when a mind is quiet enough, it becomes a place where others can reflect themselves without fear of being judged. No one knows how they learned, no one sees how they practiced. But one thing is certain, their silence is not a gift from the sky. It is the crystallization of countless breakages, countless long sleepless nights, countless moments looking back at oneself with an uncompromising gaze. And when finally they are brave enough not to run from themselves anymore, they step into the region of light inside, the kind of light that no lamp of the world can illuminate. That light is not for them to be brilliant. It is the brightness of a mind no longer imprisoned in the molds of right, good, superior, inferior. When the mind transcends those polarities, silence naturally becomes the only suitable voice, not because it is noble, but because it is the most truthful. In that stillness, they hear what all sounds previously covered up, a very small whisper of life, as if life is saying, "Don't search anymore, you never lost it." When that voice resonates in the depth of consciousness, every search of the past, searching for peace, searching for happiness, searching for meaning, dissolves like dust, not because humans have achieved what they wanted, but because they realize that all those searches stemmed from an illusion, the illusion that one lacks something in the reality of stillness. There is no lack, no excess, no purpose to pursue, nor a burden to let go of. There is only life operating by itself. When understanding that, humans no longer ask how to be at peace, because peace is the nature of a mind that no longer wavers. It is not a reward for some effort, but the natural state of one who no longer clings to any name or form. That person still lives like everyone else, eating, working, walking, talking, laughing, but in every small movement, there is no tension, no person trying to achieve anything, no one fighting. Every movement is so light it seems to bear no trace of time. When looking at them, we see a simplicity that is hard to believe, not the type of simplicity trying to create rusticity, but the simplicity of a mind that has shaken off all burdens. Simple as light just shining, simple as flower scent just wafting, simple as water just flowing, not knowing it is flowing, not needing anyone to praise it as clean. That simplicity is the peak of wisdom, because when one still knows that one understands, that wisdom still bears the shadow of the ego. Only when understanding to the point of forgetting that one understands does wisdom truly merge into life. The quiet person therefore does not stand above anyone and does not bow below anyone. They do not want to lead, nor do they want to follow. They do not want to teach, nor do they need to be taught. They are like a stream flowing underground that no one sees, but wherever it passes, trees turn green again. Also from that stillness, a paradox opens up. In an era where everyone wants to be heard, to be seen, to be noticed, silence becomes the highest act of rebellion. Not rebellion to oppose anyone, but rebellion to escape the very noise inside. Amidst the arguments, theories, rebuttals, calls, there is one single thing that does not change, the silent knowing that is witnessing it all. When we return to that knowing, every question that once clung to us falls away. With no questioner remaining, the answer is also not needed. And in that moment, silence becomes light. Not the light to see the outside world, but to see the place we have never dared to look, the transparent void where all fears dissolve. When we touch that void, every search stops. Nothing left to add, nothing left to subtract, only life breathing through us. If at some moment We suddenly find our hearts strangely peaceful without any reason. That is the moment that light gently touches us like the whisper of life. You have returned home. And perhaps that is also the final reason why awakened people become quiet and speak little. Not because they try to be silent, not because they choose silence, but because they have heard the wordless voice, the voice that has silently echoed throughout a lifetime.